Good morning, everybody. We're here today to discuss COVID-19 business interruption insurance claims with William Clayton. William Clayton is a highly regarded expert in the area of insurance law, having represented scores of insurance companies over the last 25 years. He maintains a national civil trial practice, having tried more than 100 cases in state and federal courts, and has won over $150 million in jury verdicts and settlements. He is also the founder and managing partner of Clayton Trial Lawyers, CTL Lawyers. William went to college at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, where he graduated at the top 5% of his class with distinction. He then went on to a top 10 law school, Northwestern Pritzker School of Law in Chicago. After law school, he landed one of the most prestigious law positions possible in the country. He was a law clerk on the U.S. Court of Appeals. William has been listed in Best Lawyers in America and as a super lawyer. He was also listed as a top litigation attorney in New York City and Nevada. Nationally, he is board certified, proven, tested excellence. He's also board certified as a civil trial lawyer in Florida and Nevada. And as recent as April 2020, William was a principal shareholder at Greenberg Traurig LLP, one of the top 10 largest law firms in the United States. He was also the former national co-chair of Greenberg Traurig's real estate litigation group. He is licensed to practice law in Florida, Nevada, New York, and DC. He lectures nationally on many subject areas, including insurance law, bad faith, real estate litigation, and all aspects of jury trials. He is, of course, also an expert in the area of business interruption claims. William, do you want to introduce us to this subject area?
Thank you, Miguel. Sure. COVID-19 is a black swan event, they say. They say it's a once in 100-year catastrophe. Nearly all businesses, except Amazon, Costco, Whole Foods, large drugstore chains, are in an economic crisis. Millions of businesses in hotels, restaurants, and retail industries face backbreaking financial times and potential bankruptcies. Evan Greenberg of Chubb recently estimated damages at $1 trillion. The economic disruption from COVID causes us to ask whether insurance can cover these massive financial losses. We are here to answer the 5 most pressing questions on whether your business can get paid for your damages. We have 5 compelling questions we will answer for you.
And I guess these 5 questions, which most people will have, is A, will my insurance policy cover this catastrophe? What do you say on that?
Maybe.
The other one would be, this wasn't a fire or a hurricane. So what is the pathway to recovery on such an insurance agreement?
You have to recover in a very navigated and purposeful way.
And I guess another one that's pretty simple, but most people have, is how do I go about making a claim?
By written notice to your insurance company.
Okay. And what if your agent says, I'll make the claim for you? Should you trust them?
You can trust them, probably, but no, you need to do it yourself. You need to look in the policy in an area that's called notice provisions, and that's exactly where the claim needs to go.
And what about timing? When should a business or a person send a notice?
Don't wait, do it now.
And then last one, this is something that a lot of people have asked me is, will Congress or the courts come to the rescue for businesses that are going bankrupt or facing a lot of financial hardships?
Congress, I don't think so. The courts, maybe.
Okay, and we'll talk more about in detail, I guess, about these answers to these questions in depth and how to navigate these claims. But to begin, why does it seem these insurance policies are so complicated?
Because they are. Insurance policies are promises and agreements, like any other contract. Like marriage. Marriage is a contract, but those vows are much simpler than what's in your insurance policy. There are scores of pages in an insurance contract. Your application for insurance has your signature. The insurance policy back from a company is, in essence, the full agreement.
Now, how are policies different from state to state?
That's a really good question. And the answer is states govern insurance law. States have regulators that will be involved with approving or not approving certain insurance policies. And with 50 states, you don't have an agreement that's standard. There's nothing standard across the board. There are literally thousands of different commercial insurance policies. And insurance contracts are some of the most complicated contracts that there are.
I guess that's why it's important to have an expert like you on your case.
Right.
Okay, let's go to the next question. What are the types of policies that may be open to your business damage claim from COVID?
I would say look in 3 areas. Commercial property insurance is one, commercial general liability policies is another, and specific business interruption endorsements or provisions.
So on that topic, is there a specific type of business interruption insurance coverage?
Yes. For example, for a particular event, those claims will be paid, I predict. You know, a single entertainment event like South by Southwest in Austin or Concheli Valley Music Festival in Riverside. Those are special events that got canceled. I predict they'll get paid. The London Times on May 14th reported that Lloyd's of London, you know, the type of a go-to insurer for event coverage like that, expects to pay out over $4 billion due to COVID, and most of that due to event cancellations.
Interesting. And where does one find business interruption language in a specific insurance policy?
It's going to be in two places. It could be within the very policy itself, or it could be an attachment or what's called an endorsement to the policy that typically goes at the end.
And how does that work?
Well, you know, for example, if a factory shuts down a business, the business interruption coverage will pay for lost income and covered expenses until the damage can be repaired and production restored.
Okay, and I've read about contingent business interruption. How does that work?
That's a little bit different. Contingent business interruption will occur when somebody else in a supply chain has damages or an event. So in a chain, for example, of making cell phones, if say a typhoon hits Asia and a supplier's factory goes down, and thus the cell phones cannot be completed, those could be covered under what's called contingent business interruption coverage.
And what about commercial property insurance? Will that cover the losses?
Maybe. You know, most businesses have property insurance covering damage to their buildings, and they got it either because the landlord insisted that the company have it, or maybe your banker. So most companies have property insurance that cover furnishings and contents due to a covered cause, like wildfires in the Bay Area last year, tornadoes in the Midwest or South, or like the last hurricane that hit the States, Hurricane Irma.
Got it. And will that type of insurance cover lost income as well, or no?
Possibly. It's important to note that viruses are generally not spelled out as a specific covered problem in a standard policy. Like, let's say the policy is what's called all risk. That may be a pathway to recover in business interruption damages.
Okay, but say a business makes an insurance claim for lost income as a result of COVID-19. Where will the disagreement be between the business and the insurance company?
The real battleground is going to be on physical damage and that damage requirement. Property insurance contracts often require what's called direct physical loss or damage to property. And some policies may not have an exclusion for viruses. And so the cases and the claims will sort of turn on whether COVID, the virus, was actually damaging property.
Very interesting. What if a business had to close? What can they do?
Well, I mean, in that instance, the business could make a claim for the direct physical loss. And the businesses can turn to and look to some of the governmental orders. For example, the mayor of New York issued a specific order that said, and appeared to try to help people making insurance claims, that the virus was physically causing damage to property.
Will a declaration like that have any impact on insurance agreements?
I mean, it can. I mean, the courts can look to it. I mean, in Broward County, Fort Lauderdale, for example, there was an order there too, an emergency order that said, quote, the virus is causing physical damage to property, end quote.
What about Florida counties? I know you just spoke about those, but what about any governor orders or anything like that?
Those too can be helpful, but those will need to be presented to a judge who will ultimately decide whether it's a covered claim or not a covered claim.
Got it. And you discussed this a bit before, but are there specific exclusions for viruses or bacterial losses?
Maybe. You know, there was a SARS pandemic in 2003, and many businesses got later sent endorsements that excluded virus losses. And so that's where you'd have to look to see if viruses were specifically excluded as a basis for a claim or not. Now, if you've got a policy that has an endorsement or states that there is a specific exclusion for business interruption damages caused by a virus, then I'm saying that's like climbing Mount Everest. at the worst time of the year.
And do you have any specific policy examples that you can talk about today?
Okay, sure. We were recently working on different claims for businesses making business interruption coverage claims. And I'm looking at a commercial general liability coverage form. It has standard language. And in that, it's got an exclusion for fungi or bacterial damages, but it doesn't mention viruses. And so that may be an open door.
Can you talk about any other policies that you've seen recently?
Sure. There is another business owner type coverage policy that we've looked at, and that unfortunately has an exclusion due to viruses. And so that's going to be a closed door.
Got it. And what about civil authority coverage? Is that a thing in these insurance policies?
Right. We were talking about that just a little bit ago on the mayor of New York's order, or say Broward County's commission's order on whether that's physical damage or not. That goes into an area called civil authority coverage. And policies can have a provision where more monies were paid for that type of coverage if a government says a shutdown is ordered. And under that type policy, it's possible to recover business interruption claims.
So I guess in the end, it's going to be up to the courts. How do you think they're going to rule?
I mean, it's going to be a tough call. It can vary from state to state. It can vary from county to county. But I would say this: judges generally favor equity. And some would have predicted, over a decade ago, that with the BP oil spill claims, it would have been unthinkable to imagine that the BP oil disaster that took place 50 miles from shore in international water could result in a federal court ordering BP oil to pay substantial damages.
Interesting. So I guess courts have expanded coverage in the past. How big was the BP spill compared to COVID-19 in terms of financial losses?
Overall, probably small. I mean, it cost BP about $62 billion to settle the lawsuits. And here we're talking about $1 trillion. And so it's like night versus day. COVID would be a much more challenging environment.
And how did the courts find coverage for the BP oil spill legally? What was the legal theory?
The legal theory was something that I don't think it had been tried before. It came under what's called the Federal Clean Water Act that was enacted to deal with navigable waters in the United States. To my knowledge, I don't think it was ever expanded to include a spill 50 miles offshore in international waters in the Gulf there.
Interesting. And I guess there was a little bit of motivation when the U.S. government threatened criminal prosecution, right?
Oh, yes. Right. That's what you call real motivation.
Right. Can pressure on insurance companies by insurance regulators also motivate insurance carriers to pay out these claims?
I mean, you can get a headline on it, but I don't think so. I mean, I was reading recently, say a week ago, the London Times reported that there was a letter that was sent to the regulation group in Britain by 700 businesses who are complaining that their insurance companies, I mean, like big ones, I'm not going to name them, but that they weren't paying claims. But what's that going to do? I mean, it creates some noise, it creates a headline and a story, but I'm not sure that's going to motivate the insurers to engage in large-scale payouts.
And we discussed this a little bit before, but what about Congress? Can they come to the rescue? I know they proposed one bill to mandate that all carriers cover these types of losses. You think that will pass?
Well, I don't know if it'll pass. Maybe. You're dealing with an area of, let's say, business that's going to make it very daunting to try to get that through Congress. I think insurers are generally reluctant to cover business interruption claims due to this pandemic, given the scale of it. I mean, right, a California congressman introduced the bill. It's called Business Interruption Insurance Coverage Act 2020. It's supposed to address the denials and to make it retroactive. But the retroactivity part of it is what's really interesting or challenging.
An interesting question is, would you recommend that all businesses file or submit claims to their carriers just in case this bill passes or in case the insurance carriers are forced to pay out on these claims?
Right, exactly right. Because if there's an off chance the law could get passed, signed by the president, that would be retroactive, you will still want to make the claim now. Most policies have provisions that say that claims need to be made promptly. And so, right, I would definitely still do it now, because on the off chance that passes, then coverage may be brought to life.
And what's your opinion on the constitutionality of the retroactive provision of that proposed bill?
I think that's going to be a really interesting point for judges to wrestle with. I mean, I've read some cases that would suggest that, oh, well, the government can actually do something as a matter of law retroactively. But and most people there on that issue would cite in defense to it, in defense to the state doing something to include coverage or expand it. The U.S. Constitution in Article 10 says, no state shall pass any law impairing obligations of contract. I mean, that's like a single contract. But here you're not talking about a contract. You're talking about rewriting millions of insurance agreements. And so the unconstitutionality aspect of that rings really loud to me.
With respect to some case law, is there any court precedent regarding coverage for direct physical loss caused by, for example, virus or bacteria?
There have been some cases over the years, and it goes back maybe, say, 15 years. There was one case that danced around, but in essence held that presence of bacteria in a home could amount to a physical loss. But the court sidestepped a direct ruling on bacteria.
Got it. And what kind of policy was that?
That would have been a property claim, a residential property policy.
And what was the problem specifically?
Bacteria was found in a home that rendered the home or house untenable.
And Travelers was the insurance carrier. What position did they take?
That's a different case. That's called Gregory Packaging versus Travelers. That was a commercial policy, and Gregory Packing installed a refrigeration system. Kind of like juice for children, like Capri Sun.
Okay, and what did the judge decide in that case specifically?
The judge decided that as a result of a material being placed on the floor, in that instance it was carpet, that could cause and would fall within a general liability policy as being physical injury to the property, where the property could not be used. That was a commercial case, and so that's a little interesting for our discussions today.
Got it. Is there any other case that you think was worth a mention?
There's another case called Essex Insurance Company that dealt with a residential property where a home was rendered uninhabitable due to toxic gases. There it was gases released by defective drywall. But so you've just heard like 3 cases, but 2 of those deal with homes, and only 1 was dealing with a commercial context or on a commercial policy. And here we've got businesses that will need to rely on their business property insurance claims and provisions and claims for business interruption under a CGL type policy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Very interesting conversation with you.
Miguel, it's been my pleasure. And if there are any questions that anyone may have on their specific business and its policy, you can reach out to us at info@ctllawyers.com, info@ctllawyers.com. Thank you very much.